All right, so Bajaj Finserv, Q2 2024. Let's unpack this whole thing.
Yeah, let's dive in.
We've got the filings, we've got the press release. This is going to be fun. Now, we're not just talking Bajaj Finserv Limited, BFS. We gotta mention the subsidiaries, too.
No, absolutely. Can't forget those.
Especially, Bajaj Finance Limited, BFL, and then even their subsidiary, Bajaj Housing Finance Limited, BHFL.
Right.
And of course, gonna have the insurance side, Bajaj Allianz General Insurance, BAG, Bajaj Allianz Life Insurance, BHF.
Well, family.
It's a whole world over there at Bajaj Finserv.
It's true, and that's what makes it so interesting, right?
Yeah,
you gotta understand how each piece fits into the larger picture.
Yeah, exactly. So let's start with that big picture then. BFS had themselves a pretty strong Q2. Consolidated profit after tax up, total income up a significant 30% year over year.
Yeah, you don't see that every day.
If I'm a BFS shareholder, I'm feeling pretty good right about now.
Oh yeah, definitely. Those are some impressive numbers. Got to remember though, BFS is a holding company, so those stellar results, they're really driven by the performance of their subsidiaries. It all trickles down, or I guess trickles up.
Yeah, like a parent company beaming with pride at their star athlete child or something, right?
Exactly.
But in this case, the star athlete, that's got to be Bajaj Finance Limited, BFL. They are the engine room of this whole operation. And let me tell you, they are humming.
Oh, yeah.
Almost 4 million new customers, nearly 10 million new loans in a single quarter. That's a growth strategy on steroids.
Wow, those are some big numbers.
What are your initial thoughts on that, seeing that kind of aggressive growth?
Well, it's certainly aggressive, no doubt about it. And this
Yeah.
kind of rapid expansion, can be exciting, but it definitely comes with its own set of risks. We're going to want to take a closer look at those loan loss provisions.
Right.
The money they set aside to cover potential defaults, and of course those NPA figures, the non-performing assets.
Got to keep an eye on those.
Those are the canaries in the coal mine. You
Right.
know?
Absolutely. I got to make sure the growth is sustainable and not just a sugar rush. And speaking of BFL and growth, we can't ignore the elephant in the room, or I guess the subsidiary in the room.
Which one's that?
BHFL, of course. That recent IPO, that was massive news.
Absolutely massive. And it directly impacts what you're seeing in these financial documents. That IPO, it changed BFL's ownership stake in BHFL, brought it down to 88.75%. But more importantly, it allowed BHFL to raise a boatload of cash. We're talking 6,560 crore.
6,000.
That's an incredible amount of money. That kind of injection of capital, it's going to have ripple effects for sure.
Yeah, like dropping a boulder in a pond. Those waves are going to be felt everywhere.
Okay, so looking at these figures here, I got to be honest, some of this stuff is a little intimidating,
Oh, yeah, it can be a lot to unpack.
Like this unrealized mark-to-market business impacting BFL's consolidated profit. Can you break that down for me? Sure. Yeah, it sounds a lot more complex than it really is. It just means some of the investments that BFL holds, they went down in value this quarter, at least on paper.
Okay.
It's what we call an unrealized loss, because until they sell those investments, they haven't actually lost any money.
So it's like when, say, your favorite pair of sneakers, they go on sale like a week after you buy them.
Exactly.
You haven't actually lost any money unless you try to, sell them for less than what you paid.
Precisely. And that's why it's so important to, look beyond just the profit figures in isolation. You got to understand the context. In this case, BFL's investment strategy, that helps paint a much clearer picture of their financial health.
Knowledge is power. All right, so we've tackled the BFL side of things. Let's shift gears over to the insurance part of the Bajaj Finserv empire, shall we?
Sounds good.
First up, Bajaj Allianz General Insurance, BAG. Now their gross written premium, it actually decreased. Should we be worried?
Well, first glance, you might think so, but if you dig a little deeper, you see that decrease is mostly due to the timing of government health business, which can be kind of unpredictable.
Okay.
What's more telling is their organic growth, which is a very healthy 11%. That's actually outperforming the industry average.
Okay, so while the initial headline might have seemed like a dip, they're actually doing all right.
Yeah, they're in a pretty good spot.
But I am a little curious about this increase in their claim ratio. That's not usually a good sign, right?
No, you're right. It's definitely something to keep an eye on. The press release mentions that natural disaster claims, they call it NatCat, played a role.
NatCat.
Yeah, natural catastrophes. But even beyond those, this increase suggests there might be some shifts happening in the types of risks they're insuring, which would be interesting to investigate further.
Okay, so some things to watch out for with Baybel, but overall, they seem to be holding their own. Now let's move over to their life insurance counterpart, Bajaj Allianz Life Insurance, BALIC. Looks like they're seeing some pretty good growth in new business premium.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And not just any growth. They're really cleaning up in those individual rated and group protection segments. Seems like their strategic focus on those areas is paying off.
Yeah, they're definitely onto something there. But I'm also seeing this decrease in shareholders' profit after tax. So are things not as rosy as they seem? Time to hit the panic button.
Not at all, not at all. See, in the life insurance world, a drop in profits, it doesn't always mean things are going south, especially when new business is booming like this. New policies, they often mean upfront expenses for the insurer, things like, underwriting and administrative costs. It's an investment in future profitability.
Ah, so it's kind of like when you buy a fancy new coffee maker. Got to shell out more cash up front, but you're hoping those delicious lattes will pay off in the long run, right?
Exactly, exactly. And that's where a metric called net new business value, or NBV,
Mm-hmm.
comes in. It basically gives you a clearer picture of that long-term value those new policies are generating, even if they're not translating into huge profits right this second. And guess what? Balic's NBV is looking quite healthy.
Music to my ears. Long story short, we don't need to panic about that short-term profit dip. Balic's playing the long game, and it seems to be working. Now, speaking of long games, BFS has been dipping their toes into all sorts of new ventures these days. Health tech, asset management. I gotta admit, sometimes it feels like they're spreading themselves a little thin. What are your thoughts on all that?
Yeah, it's true. They're not afraid to explore, to try new things. And yeah, you're right. Those ventures are currently operating at a loss. But this is key. Those losses, they were expected. BFS is strategically invested in these up-and-coming businesses with the understanding that it's going to take time and resources for them to really blossom. Remember BFL and that whole aggressive growth strategy we talked about? Well, BHL wouldn't even exist if they weren't willing to take a chance, a calculated
So
risk.
it's more like a calculated risk, not necessarily a sign that they've bitten off more than they can chew.
Exactly. These new businesses, they might be small potatoes compared to their core operations right now, but they got the potential to be major players down the line. It's like, think about it. Remember when BFL was just starting out? Look at them now.
Talk about a glow up, right? Okay, so we've covered a lot here. Loan growth, IPOs, insurance claims, emerging businesses. Before we wrap up, anything else in these filings that really jumped out at you? Anything our listeners should pay close attention to? It's interesting, isn't it? It seems like BFS is really walking this tightrope, trying to make the most out of their current businesses while also, like, placing these strategic bets on the future.
Yeah, it's a balancing act for sure.
It's like they're playing chess, making these calculated moves, not just to win today, but to set themselves up for the long game?
You got it. That's a great way to put it. Bajaj Finserv, they're not just resting on their laurels. They're actively shaping their future, which is impressive, especially in such a complex financial landscape. And, investors and analysts, they're definitely taking notice.
Right, because past success, that's no guarantee of future performance, especially in a market that's evolving as quickly as this one.
Absolutely. And that's what makes their push into these emerging businesses so fascinating, right?
Yeah.
Because it really highlights their willingness to take risks.
Yeah, calculated risks, but still, it's like they're planting these seeds for future growth while still harvesting from their existing trees, if that makes sense.
It does. It does. And it really makes you think, how are these new ventures going to adapt? How are they going to evolve in what's becoming an increasingly competitive landscape,
Yeah.
especially with, the rise of fintech and the constantly changing consumer behaviors and all that?
Yeah, lots of unknowns, that's for sure. But if there's one company that can navigate those choppy waters, I gotta think it might be Bajaj Finserv. They always seem to find a way to stay ahead of the curve.
That's a great point. It's so easy to focus on the here and now when you look at a company's performance. But often the real insights, they come from understanding the long-term vision, that ability to adapt. And Bajaj Finserv, they're a perfect example of that.
Couldn't agree more. Well, folks, there you have it. Your deep dive into Bajaj Finserv's Q2 2024 performance. We explored their impressive growth, dug into their risk management strategies, and even took a little peek into the crystal ball to get a glimpse at those future plans.
And remember, this is really just the tip of the iceberg. I encourage you to really dig into these filings yourself, connect the dots, and see what other interesting tidbits you can find. The more you understand a company's financials, the better equipped you'll be to make those informed decisions.
Words to live by. Big thanks to you, expert speaker, for lending your expertise to this deep dive. Always a pleasure picking your brain. And to you, dear listener, thanks for joining us on this journey into the world of business and finance. Until next time, keep those thinking caps on, and we'll catch you on our next deep dive.